Why there is no bridge between America and Russia. Every day on the western edge of Alaska, two small islands sit in the middle of the Bering Strait. One belongs to the United States, the other belongs to Russia. They are called Little Diomede and Big Diomede. The water between them is 2.4 miles wide. In winter, that water freezes, and the ice can connect the two islands completely. The international date line runs directly between them. Big Diomede, the Russian island, is 21 hours ahead of Little Diomede, the American island. Locals call the Russian one Tomorrow Island and the American one Yesterday Island. Two countries, two continents. A full day apart in time, separated by a stretch of water about as wide as the island of Manhattan is long. There is no bridge, there is no tunnel, there is no ferry, there is nothing. At its narrowest point, the entire Bering Strait, from Cape Dezhnev on the Russian mainland to Cape Prince of Wales on the Alaskan mainland, is just 51 miles across. The Channel Tunnel between England and France runs 31 miles and has carried trains since 1994. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge runs 34 miles across open ocean and opened in 2018. The engineering to cross 51 miles of shallow water exists, and it has existed for decades. The connection between the two largest countries on Earth has been proposed seriously for over 120 years. It has never been built, and the reasons why are one of the most fascinating stories in the history of engineering and geopolitics. Look at the map. The Bering Strait sits at the very top of the Pacific, where Russia and the United States almost touch. The water here averages just 98 to 164 feet deep. The maximum depth is around 300 feet. Compare that to the English Channel, where the Channel Tunnel runs through water far deeper than most of the Bering Strait route. The water is shallow, the distance is short. The two Diomede Islands sit right in the middle as natural stepping stones. From an engineering standpoint, this is one of the most buildable ocean crossings on the planet. The water has never been the problem. But before we get to the real reason no bridge exists, and there is one specific reason that has stopped every single proposal for the last 80 years. First, you need to understand just how many times people have tried. The idea is old. In 1890, the former governor of the Colorado Territory, William Gilpin, published a vision for what he called a cosmopolitan railway, a global rail network that would connect the continents, including a crossing at the Bering Strait. He imagined a single line that could one day carry a passenger from the cities of Europe all the way across Russia, over the strait and down through North America. In 1890, the technology to build any part of it did not exist. The vision was a fantasy, but it was the first time anyone had put the idea on paper as a serious engineering goal rather than a dream. In 1905, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia considered a proposal for a railway and tunnel linking Siberia to Alaska. By then, the world had changed. The Trans-Siberian Railway was under construction, pushing Russian rail further east than ever before. An American syndicate approached the Russian court with a plan to extend that line all the way to the strait and tunnel beneath it. The Tsar gave the idea his attention, but the technology of the early 20th century could not deliver a tunnel of that length under that water, and the political turmoil that would eventually consume the Russian monarchy pulled all attention elsewhere. The plan faded. During the Second World War, when the United States and the Soviet Union were briefly allies against Germany, the idea surfaced again. American war planners looked at the Bering Strait as a possible overland supply route, a way to move equipment to the Soviet front without sending ships across an Atlantic Ocean full of German submarines. The Soviet leadership rejected it. Even as allies, the Soviet Union would not permit a permanent physical connection to American territory. The idea was shelved before it ever became a plan. The most serious modern attempt came in 2007. Russian officials publicly backed a project called the TKM World Link, a 6,000-kilometer transport corridor anchored by a tunnel roughly 100 kilometers long beneath the Bering Strait. The total price tag was estimated at around $65 billion. The strait crossing alone was projected at 10 to 12 billion. Russian railways supported it. Conferences were held in Moscow. In 2008, the Russian government approved railway development deeper into the Far East as part of the long-range plan. For a brief moment, it looked like the century-old idea might finally have real political weight behind it. Then it stalled, like everything before it. Now here is where the story gets serious, because the reason all of these proposals failed is not engineering. It is the land on either side of the water. The Bering Strait crossing itself is the easy part. The hard part is what connects to it. Look at the Russian side. The nearest established railhead is at Yakutsk, the capital of the Sakha Republic in eastern Siberia. From Yakutsk to the edge of the Bering Strait is roughly 3,700 kilometers of some of the most hostile terrain on Earth, permafrost, wilderness, and winter temperatures that routinely drop far below -40 degrees. There is no existing railway across that distance. There are almost no roads. There are almost no towns. It would all have to be built from nothing, across frozen ground that shifts and heaves with the seasons and makes every kilometer of construction a fight against the land itself. Now look at the American side. The state of Alaska has no railway connection to the rest of the United States at all. None. The Alaska Railroad is an isolated system that ends at Fairbanks and connects to nothing beyond the state. From Fairbanks to the western coast, where a bridge would land, is hundreds of miles of roadless, trackless wilderness, tundra, mountain ranges, and wide rivers with no crossings. So the crossing might be 51 miles. But to make that crossing useful, you would need to build thousands of miles of brand new railway through frozen, empty, infrastructure-free land on both sides. The bridge is the cheap part. Everything leading up to it is the expense that has killed every proposal. A bridge to nowhere, connecting a wilderness on one side to a wilderness on the other, serves no one. And building the railways to fix that would cost many times more than the crossing itself. There is a second reason, and it is the one that matters most. For most of the last century, neither government actually wanted a permanent physical link between American and Russian soil. During the Cold War, the Bering Strait was nicknamed the Ice Curtain. The border between the two superpowers ran right through the water between the Diomede Islands. Families that had lived on both islands for generations were separated when the border closed. The native Inupiat people of Big Diomede were relocated to the Russian mainland. A fixed connection across that border was not seen as an opportunity. It was seen as a strategic vulnerability. A permanent route that could, in theory, move far more than just freight. Even after the Cold War ended and the Soviet Union dissolved, that caution never fully disappeared. Every time relations between Washington and Moscow improved enough to discuss the project seriously, they soon deteriorated again before anything could be built. The connection always required trust, and trust between these two countries has never lasted long enough to pour the first foundation. There is a third reason, and it is geological. The Bering Strait sits near the boundary between two great tectonic plates in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. The Aleutian Islands, just to the south, are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. In 1964, the Great Alaska Earthquake measured 9.2 in magnitude, the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in North America and the second most powerful ever recorded anywhere on the planet. The shaking lasted nearly 5 minutes. It triggered tsunamis that crossed the entire Pacific Ocean. Any bridge or tunnel across this region would have to be engineered to survive an earthquake of that scale. The Channel Tunnel never had to account for that. The geology beneath the English Channel is stable. A Bering crossing would sit in a zone where a catastrophic earthquake is not a possibility, but a certainty over a long enough timeline. Building a 51-mile structure that can survive the second largest earthquake type ever recorded is an engineering challenge no nation has yet been willing to take on. Now here is a question worth sitting with. If the United States and Russia ever did agree to build this connection, and a third country offered to fund most of the cost in exchange for using the route to move its own goods across the world, would the United States accept that offer? Drop your answer in the comments. Because that exact scenario has been proposed more than once, and how you answer it says a lot about how you weigh economic opportunity against strategic independence. Even so, the dream has never fully died. To understand why, compare it to the one crossing that did get built. The Channel Tunnel between England and France was first seriously proposed in the early 1800s. For nearly 2 centuries it was rejected, mostly by the British, who feared that a tunnel under the channel would hand an invading army a direct route into England. The same fear that has always haunted the Bering Strait. It was only in 1986, after the strategic calculation finally shifted, that the two governments agreed to build it. Construction took 6 years. It opened in 1994. Today, it carries tens of millions of passengers and well over 1 million trucks every year, and it connects 2 countries that fought each other across the better part of 1,000 years. That is the precedent. 2 nations that distrusted each other for centuries eventually decided the connection was worth more than the gap. The Bering Strait has never reached that moment. The fear has always outweighed the opportunity. And here is the part that makes this story current. In October 2025, a senior Russian official named Kirill Dmitriev, the head of Russia's sovereign wealth fund and one of Vladimir Putin's investment envoys, publicly proposed building the crossing once again. He called it the Putin-Trump Tunnel. The pitch was a 70-mile rail and cargo tunnel beneath the Bering Strait, completed in under 8 years at a cost of around $8 billion. He suggested that Elon Musk's Boring company could use modern tunneling technology to slash the cost from the traditional estimate of over $65 billion down to a fraction of that. He framed it as a symbol of unity between the 2 nations. The proposal came right after a phone call between the 2 countries' leaders. The American president's public response to the idea was a single cautious word: interesting. That is where the project stands today. Not as a funded plan, not as an engineering survey, as a proposal floated across a negotiating table that has been floated in one form or another for over a century and abandoned every single time. The estimate of $8 billion covers only the tunnel. It does not touch the thousands of miles of railway that would still have to cross the permafrost and the tundra on either side. And it does not solve the oldest problem of all, the one that has nothing to do with money or engineering, and everything to do with whether the two countries actually want to be connected. So step back and look at the whole picture. The water is shallow. The distance is short, just 51 miles at the narrowest point. The Diomede Islands sit in the middle like stepping stones placed there by nature. The engineering has been ready for decades. The economic case has been made over and over by serious people across more than a century. Every individual obstacle, taken alone, can be solved. And yet, nothing has ever been built, because a bridge is never only an engineering project. It is two governments agreeing that being connected is better than being apart. France and England reached that agreement after 1,000 years. The United States and Russia never have. The next time you look across a stretch of water at land on the other side, remember the Bering Strait. The thing standing in the way is almost never the water. It is almost never the engineering. It is two countries who have decided, over and over again across more than 130 years, that the gap between them is worth more than the bridge across it. The water between Yesterday Island and Tomorrow Island still freezes solid every winter. And in over 130 years of proposals, not a single stone has ever been laid.